Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
The dimensional infection incident related to the left path made Chen Ming feel the same fear as before. But after calming down, he suddenly found that the fear did not simply bring him fear. While this fear was with him, he also inexplicably felt a little excitement. The excitement of being on the edge of danger made Chen Ming feel something indescribable. He seemed to be expecting something to happen. So after returning to the branch, Chen Ming would do those serious things honestly as soon as possible. Just want to give himself some time to calm down and take time to think after calming down. As a result, Chen Ming confirmed that this feeling was not an illusion, but his real feeling. He pursued stability when he was in danger, but he did want to pursue some excitement when he was stable. Chen Ming felt a little contradictory. At the beginning, he clearly pursued a stable life, but in the process of constantly encountering and solving dangers, he missed the feeling of being in danger. As a result, the stable life he was living now was a bit boring for him compared to the past. Moreover, Chen Ming found out in the process of thinking that there were some signs of his situation before. For example, when the first temporary base was developed. After the initial novelty wore off, all that was left was to look at the various surveyed data reported by Hui Huang every day. Chen Ming didn't even need to analyze the data himself. Hui Huang had already processed all the valuable data when he took it out, and all the things that should be done would be done well, so he had nothing to do at all. In addition to the regulation of the general direction, Chen Ming felt a little nauseous just by looking at the data. Only when he helped some Yuhui individuals who encountered dangerous situations to escape from danger and repair the spacecraft could he barely feel a little interesting. So Chen Ming took the initiative to develop the fake body technology later and let the fake body run to the 14th core. And the 14th core is indeed more interesting than the almost unchanging development road. Competing with nature, competing with the environment, and competing with people, it is definitely interesting to compete with people. But in the same way, after the initial novelty wore off, the 14th core branch gradually became boring. Although some people are indeed targeting him and Bai Quan, they can basically use some ordinary means, which are reasonable means at the political level, or simply some insignificant means. Only the time with Hui really made Chen Ming feel that his adrenaline was stimulated, and he became excited. Although Chen Ming did not pay attention to his emotions when he fought with Hui before, his attention was all on the surrounding volcanoes and using mental power to control the purgatory core to fight Hui. But now looking back, Chen Ming found that he was indeed excited about this matter. Of course, there was also the time when the Black Mist psychic sneaked into the spacecraft and tried to assassinate. That time was an exception. After all, this was the first time that Zhu Jing took out the psychic, and it was also a rare opportunity for Chen Ming to confront a psychic head-on. Speaking of confronting the psychic head-on, Chen Ming suddenly remembered the last time he confronted the psychic head-on, that is, when he fought with Yin Xiong. He was on the field in person at that time, not with a fake body. The excitement at that time is still unforgettable for Chen Ming when he recalls it now. Of course, Chen Ming is not the kind of person who gets carried away by this feeling. He is always calm when doing things. After all, if you really want to talk about boredom, the prosthesis has classes with Bai Quan every day, and the main body still has to stare at the large amount of data transmitted back by Hui Huang every day, and has to spend almost the entire day learning cruiser-level technology, which is even more boring, but he still insists. Chen Ming only prefers the way he is more willing to accept in some optional things. And at this moment, when the dimensional infection may lead to unpredictable serious consequences, and it is a serious consequence that no one can escape, Chen Ming feels that he can participate in it. It is not to satisfy his idea of actively seeking punishment for himself because his life is too good, but simply to find something to do. Although there are other things that can distract his attention to a certain extent, such as the reconnaissance mission that Bai Quan promised before and the upcoming war. But a reconnaissance mission can only be completed in a few days at most, and the war will also take time to come. From the official start of the war, even half a year may be considered short, and it will take longer to wait for the real war to start. Moreover, Lu Wei's death happened recently, which caused Bai Quan to go back to the headquarters, which indirectly led to the fact that Chen Ming's investigation mission had to wait until Bai Quan came back. So after finishing all the things that Chen Ming left for him to do so that he could calm down and examine himself, his mind was instantly filled with this matter again. Under the influence of these factors, all Chen Ming could do now was to participate in this dimensional infection incident involving Zhu Jing. Of course, Chen Ming still valued his life very much. Although it was interesting to pursue excitement, death was also a truly terrifying thing. The danger level of dimensional infection is definitely one of the top two in terms of the horror level of things Chen Ming has experienced. The first one was when Chen Ming was almost killed by Yu Hui's tachyon spear in the space arm of the pirate space station. So even if Chen Ming has this idea now, he will not do anything personally. But if this matter is completely handed over to others to investigate, the efficiency, time, degree of danger, and whether the news will be transmitted back in time are all uncertain. He must personally choose an indirect way to participate. He only has one choice left: prosthesis. It just so happens that the president has clearly stated that the dimensional infection marks the body that has experienced the dimensional infection event. This body determines the location of another dimension and establishes a connection with another dimension, rather than a prosthesis with the same or different genes. So in reality, as long as Chen Ming is not running around with his original body, even the prosthesis in the 14th Legion can participate. But this matter is related to Zhu Jing. Chen Ming knew that although Zhu Jing wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible, he would never take the initiative to cause trouble to him when there was no chance, especially after losing a psychic. So the involvement of the prosthesis might have a counter effect. Moreover, the prosthesis is currently restricted by the rules of the 14th Legion and cannot run around. It needs to spend its days in the 14th Legion. Therefore, both the main body and the prosthesis are restricted in a sense. But Chen Ming has another choice. He created and sent to the Empire some time ago another hybrid creature of the prosthesis and the special combat unit of the Zerg, ManhwaRecap. ManhwaRecap is also one of his prostheses. He has the genes and flesh and blood imitated by the Queen of the Zerg and the ferocious creature hidden under the flesh and blood. It is not impossible for such a guy to participate in this matter alone with the help of Chen Ming behind the scenes. ManhwaRecap happened to appear everywhere in the Empire, which can also be regarded as a link that Chen Ming has been arranging. But speaking of ManhwaRecap, Chen Ming suddenly thought of something. ManhwaRecap is the product of the combination of the prosthesis created by the Queen of the Zerg and the special combat unit of the Zerg. The process of making a prosthesis seems to have a certain similarity with the process of cloning, and the fake body made is actually no different from the clone person. But the cloning process will cause dimensional infection, and the process of the Queen making a prosthesis has never happened before. Chen Ming missed this point before, and it was not until now that he suddenly realized this problem, so he immediately looked at the Queen. Then he suddenly realized that it was not just the process of making a prosthesis, but also the process of the Queen breeding new Zerg individuals. Chen Ming remembered that the Queen would lay eggs before breeding new Zerg individuals. After the eggs hatched into larvae, the Queen would put a relatively weak part of her consciousness in the Zerg hive mind into the larvae and develop with the larvae, and then expand the size of the entire population. Before the eggs hatched, there should be no ordinary Zerg consciousness inside, and even within a certain period of time after the larvae hatched, the larvae themselves should also be a simple Zerg body. Why didn't the existence of another dimension target the Queen? This question just emerged in Chen Ming's mind. After devouring Chen Ming's condensed spiritual energy source, the Queen Worm, whose spiritual power was completely linked to Chen Ming, suddenly sent a consciousness and told Chen Ming the reason. The Queen Worm will fill her consciousness into the eggs before hatching. Before the new Zerg consciousness enters the hatched larvae and the fragile consciousness adapts to the larvae's body, the Queen Worm's consciousness will not be withdrawn. Therefore, there has never been a moment when the body of the individual Zerg does not have consciousness. When Chen Ming continued to ask the Queen Worm the reason, the Queen Worm's answer made Chen Ming feel a little unexpected, but thinking about it carefully, it was indeed reasonable. It was instinct, and the instinct told the Queen Worm that it needed to do this. Chen Ming continued to ask the Queen Worm if she had any memories related to this instinct. The Queen Worm decisively denied it. That's a bit interesting. In the process of hatching eggs into larvae, If we don't look at the dimensional infection and only look at other environmental conditions, it is completely unnecessary for the queen worm's consciousness to exist in the eggs and larvae for protection. But the queen of insects did it instinctively, and Chen Ming felt that the meaning of this was somewhat intriguing. Even now, after the queen of insects evolved from devouring the psychic fungus, her reproduction method has changed from simple oviparity to oviparity plus the breeding methods of various fungi. And corresponding to the change in breeding methods, the technology of the biological building larvae incubation pool has almost matured, and larvae can be automatically hatched. But Chen Ming found that even at this time, when the biological building hatched new Zerg larvae, the queen of insects would still use consciousness to control the biological building and instill part of her consciousness into these eggs and larvae. Ensure that there is no lack of consciousness in the individuals cultivated by the queen of insects throughout the process. The same is true for the cultivation process of the prosthesis. The queen of insects fills it in with her own consciousness, and when Chen Ming needs to cooperate with the experiment, she will extract her consciousness and let Chen Ming's consciousness enter the prosthesis. Even if it was a prosthesis, it still had a certain consciousness of the queen of worms before Chen Ming took control of it. Chen Ming tried to make the queen of worms not do this, not to use consciousness to protect the eggs. But then, for the first time, the queen of worms sent a response of extreme resistance, but in the end it agreed to Chen Ming's request. Of course, Chen Ming did not commit suicide and immediately withdrew his request. Through what he had just said, he basically understood what the queen of worms' instinct was. If the history of the thorn zerg of the queen of worms could be traced back, then basically based on the history of the thorn zerg species, it could be determined how many years ago the dimensional infection had occurred. It was a pity that no more information could be obtained from the queen of worms for the time being. The memory of the Zerg would be lost in the reproduction of the queen of worms from generation to generation. Chen Ming's memory of the queen of worms only had part of the first generation of the queen of worms, not all of it. So if Chen Ming wanted to know more, he had to start with the first generation of the queen of worms. But the first generation of the queen of worms had long gone away, and the probability of encountering it was lower than finding a needle in a haystack. For the time being, I'll just ignore it. At least it can be confirmed that the queen of Zerg has never encountered similar problems of dimensional infection during the prosthetic experiment and the hatching of new Zerg. And Chen Ming does not have to worry about the situation in the future that the Zerg will be affected by him, a witness of dimensional infection, and the dimensional infection will act on the queen of Zerg. Chen Ming recorded that the queen of Zerg's instinct is to protect the Zerg body without consciousness during the cultivation process with her own consciousness. Then he turned his attention back to Enwupiing, who arrived in the Empire not long ago. Enwupiing's mission has been determined from the beginning. It is to help Chen Ming do something that he cannot do personally, or something that is inconvenient to do personally. For example, kill someone from the enemy faction of the 14th Legion who he doesn't like. For example, help Chen Ming run around in several star fields to find traces of Zhuojing. Before, the location of the Zhuojing stronghold that Chen Ming obtained from the illegitimate son of the lieutenant general in the 2 industrial colonies that now belong to him was left to Enwupiing. Chen Ming intends to let Enwupiing handle matters related to Zhuojing, so the current matter is the same. However, it is not easy for Enwupiing to go directly to Kamo 3. A person who appears inexplicably may even be targeted by his own people who are unaware of the situation at the first time. Chen Ming does not want the president or the people arranged by the empire to target Enwupiing, nor does he want to expose the fact that Enwupiing is related to him. So he must arrange it step by step and extend the logic of Enwupiing's actions to the Kamo star field. And everyone must know that Enwupiing is a friend, not an enemy. This requires a certain amount of preparation. And the best preparation is Zhuojing's body. The location of the Zhuojing stronghold, which Chen Ming deliberately concealed, is the only way for Enwupiing to go next. He has always been personally controlling and arranging everything about Enwupiing, and it has been like this since the day it was manufactured. When Enwupiing was first manufactured, he directly sent Enwupiing to the vicinity of the Empire by spacecraft. Before reaching the territory of the Empire, Enwupiing was directly stuffed into a large escape capsule that only activated the function of sending a distress signal but did not activate the freezing and hibernation function and was thrown into space. Anyway, Unwhooping's physical strength is enough to enter the universe physically, so it won't be a big problem to do it directly. Chen Ming also confirmed the traces of an active pirate fleet in the nearby star field through the news from Lao Wu in advance. The distress signal naturally fell into the eyes of this pirate fleet. Then Chen Ming directly controlled Unwhooping to break into the flagship of this pirate fleet alone. He killed almost all the pirates on the ship in a human form, wearing a military power armor that can be stuffed into a large cryogenic hibernation chamber. Only some surrendered pirates who had no bounty and could fly spaceships were left. After relying on command technology to operate the strongest flagship to kill nearly half of the remaining pirate spaceships, the remaining pirates all chose to surrender. Unwhooping completely seized the command of the pirate fleet and took the disabled fleet to the nearest pirate space station. Because he was going to enter the human society, Chen Ming had to be careful when playing Unwhooping in front of most people. In order to prevent Unwhooping from being suspected in the future, Chen Ming must design everything about Unwhooping in advance from the first step into the empire. For example, the background story, personality, and character setting. The background story is easy to solve. Anyway, there are many black households in the empire, so the background story is almost enough. The personality setting should also be dark and crazy, and it is better to have some mental power-related diseases. For example, Chen Ming recently learned about the diseases suffered by the animals that were affected by the mental pulse on Ruemu star. Rage. Those animals suffered from acute rage, while Unwhooping suffered from chronic. Of course, it can also be random rage, depending on what Chen Ming needs to decide. Such mental power diseases just fit the character setting of Unwhooping, who suddenly grew to 3 meters in size and turned into a ferocious monster. Anyway, Unwhooping's transformation will be exposed sooner or later, and because he can change back, it can be explained as psychic power at that time. So this aspect was designed in advance, so that if someone traced back to Chen Ming in the future like they did before, there would be a trace to follow. And this character design also made it convenient for Chen Ming to have Unwhooping appear nearby when he wanted to kill someone in the future, and then suddenly go crazy and kill the person. Later, after Unwhooping led the pirate fleet to the nearby pirate space station, Chen Ming also let Unwhooping get off the spacecraft wearing power armor. It showed that he had a worn-out military power armor, which might be stolen, seized, or originally belonged to him. So the rumors spread by the pirates later were not outrageous. At least it was not a person who broke into a mule and robbed pirates with his physical body, and no one had any unnecessary doubts about Unwhooping. And those pirates who were frightened by Unwhooping wearing power armor and breaking into the spacecraft alone and killing all those who dared to resist in management also gave up the idea of robbing this thing, which was a good thing for ordinary pirates to a certain extent. In short, Unwhooping found a local boss under the guidance of several captured pirates and obtained a fake identity, and then sold all the spaceships and dismissed all the pirates. Then he bought a second-hand frigate that had been heavily modified and could be driven by one person in this pirate space station. At the same time, he also bought a second-hand robot that had also been roughly modified and some supplies. The remaining money was used by Chen Ming to eat and drink on the pirate space station. One reason was to expand Unwhooping's personality and leave more traces in this pirate space station. Another reason was that Chen Ming really wanted to do this. Of course, Chen Ming was not as indulgent as Lao Wu. He still had a bottom line. After spending almost all the money, Chen Ming controlled Unwhooping to control the spaceship and left the pirate galaxy in the Edge star field. After killing a pirate fleet that wanted to come and cause trouble, Chen Ming took about half of the bodies of pirates who were frozen in the cold storage of the spaceship and had bounties on their heads and went to the local government to collect the bounty. Although the bounties of these pirates were not high, the bounties also gave this fake identity a layer of government protection. It allowed Unwhooping to stay in some colonies for a long time, so that he would not be regarded as a pure illegal household. Then Chen Ming continued to use this identity to go to an ordinary comprehensive colony in a nearby galaxy. It took a day to find a place to live, and then he kept an eye on the government department for a whole day and stared at a person in the government department stationed in this galaxy. After spending some time to make the person unconscious, Chen Ming used the Queen of Insects' ability to disguise Unwhooping as a person in this government, stole his identity, and mixed into the government department. With this identity, he hacked into the local government system and found the local identity system database. Chen Ming had never been exposed to this system before, and now he knows that the identity system database is divided into two. One is the personnel database of local people from birth to death, and the other is the database of foreign population. The foreign population database is also divided into two. One is the kind that can be connected through the database, and there are related records such as birth certificates in other colonies, which means that people with such certificates are not illegal or have fake identities. And those who cannot be connected through other regional databases are likely to have fake identities, or at least have problems. ManhwaRecap's identity is in this database. Chen Ming can see from the situation in the database. Although ManhwaRecap and a bunch of people's identities all have the words, "I have a problem," written on them. And the colony's entry review must know this when receiving identity information, otherwise it will not actively store these identity information in an independent foreign population database. But even so, this colony is still open to people with unknown identities like ManhwaRecap, and there is no direct notification to the police department to arrest them. It is obvious that fake identities have become a stable industrial chain in the gray area of the marginal star field. Of course, it doesn't matter whether there is an industrial chain or not. What is important is that ManhwaRecap's identity is in the part of the foreign population that cannot be verified by other colonies. It is for this reason that the owner of the fake identity is restricted when entering some relatively important places in the empire. So what Chen Ming has to do is very clear. Although this database has various restrictions, his psychic power has controlled the server of the local galaxy government. Through the coercive means of psychic power, ManhwaRecap's identity in the foreign population database can be moved to the local people's database. And in this process, Chen Ming also made up ManhwaRecap's entire past and deliberately left a record of his disappearance for a period of time. In addition, a record of a few years of mercenary service was inserted into ManhwaRecap's file, which just happened to explain why ManhwaRecap had the ability to hijack a pirate fleet alone and a set of military power armor after reappearing in this star field. After these were dealt with, according to the information that Chen Ming found through some permissions of the 14th Legion, this data will soon be uploaded through the local database level by level. The database information of personnel will change a lot every year or even every month, and basically all rely on machine batch review. The review will stop at the Star District level at most, and it will be directly registered above, and there will be few re-examinations. In general, only the personnel information directly registered in the Star District level government database will be reviewed when it is entered into the Star Field level government database. Chen Ming now only asked ManhwaRecap to register his identity in a colony of a star system, so the data will be approved once in the Star District at most. From then on, it will basically pass smoothly all the way up. As long as the identity information rewritten by Chen Ming can be approved once, it can basically be stably and completely retained in the database of the Empire. However, an adult who has never registered in the database and suddenly appeared in the local area, with an abrupt identity information that was entered from beginning to end within dozens of minutes, no matter how stupid the computer is, it is impossible to pass it directly. The identity registration of locals must be done year after year. Even if the locals have been away for a few years, they can also register in other places. It is impossible for a local to register for decades and suddenly register again. So Chen Ming kept the information in the database a little bit and did not upload the identity information immediately. Instead, while the data was temporarily stored in the database of the Galaxy government and the hidden program he designed limited the time when it was not uploaded, he asked ManhwaRecap to go to the local Star District government. After spending a longer time and using the same method to get into the Star District government department, Chen Ming controlled the government database again and controlled the server of the Galaxy government to upload the data. ManhwaRecap's data was naturally marked as abnormal data by the computer, and it was ready to report to the relevant departments. However, Chen Ming had already controlled the server at this time and directly forced to modify the result, so that ManhwaRecap's data passed the review safely and was placed in the local database. And according to the career of ManhwaRecap he designed, the registration records of each year were also attached. According to his current understanding, the personnel database records the modification time of each data, not the registration time. As long as the data can be sent to the database, there is basically no possibility of being discovered by others. And since they have all passed the review in the population database at the star district level, there will basically be no review as long as they are stored in the database above. The star domain level government wants to inquire about the past of a person in a colony within a galaxy in a subordinate star district. Just think about how difficult it is. From this moment on, ManhwaRecap's identity has been completely integrated into the Empire. At least there will be no problem from the database level. And in the whole process of doing this, Chen Ming has actually been a little bit nervous. After all, such an identity that can sneak into the prosperous star domain is something he wanted to get before he determined the full picture of the mining space station incident, but he couldn't get it. Now he only needs to rely on his ability, and he doesn't even need to use his ability to the fullest, and he can easily get it. Chen Ming has had this feeling several times, all of which are different from before after his spiritual power became stronger. As long as he has power, whether it is power in status or personal power, he can do things that he couldn't do when he was weak. Chen Ming can even get several fake identities in different places in the Empire, as long as he wants. Of course, there is no need for this now. Chen Ming was just a little emotional. In short, ManhwaRecap completely infiltrated the Empire from that day on, disguised as a bounty hunter who occasionally active in the marginal star field. Until today, it is time for ManhwaRecap to be active in the true sense. The target is the ecological observation space station that was discovered as the base of Zwujing before. As long as we get there, the rest will be simple. As Chen Ming's prosthesis, ManhwaRecap can use his psychic power at will. As long as ManhwaRecap is given the opportunity to contact the space station, even if he cannot directly use some psychic effects that will expose Chen Ming, those psychic powers that will not expose psychic effects are enough. Chen Ming has made a complete plan. As Chen Ming closed his eyes and opened them again, he has transferred his main consciousness to ManhwaRecap. He is now controlling ManhwaRecap's body, sitting on the Sentinel-class frigate that he bought some time ago and has been violently modified and can be driven by one person. This Sentinel is very close to the base of Zwujing. Moreover, the destination happened to be near the Edge star field. Although it was not considered an Edge star field, the overall development level was not too high. This resulted in the hyperspace channel nearby being empty most of the time. Only Chen Ming's Sentinel was parked here, and it would not be easy to find out what Chen Ming was going to do next. For this reason, there were many dense hyperspace channel clouds nearby. And Chen Ming's target at the moment was these rolling, deep purple, flashing purple lightning hyperspace channel clouds. He needed to take the initiative to break into the clouds and destroy the spacecraft to a certain extent. Because although his target of this trip was the base of Zwujing, it was an ecological observation space station on the surface. In such a place, there was no such thing as someone running over there with nothing to do. After all, this was not an Edge star field, not the border of the Empire, nor the mining space station where Chen Ming had been. Mining space stations were close to the border of the Empire, with few surrounding space stations and colonies, and they could occasionally provide supplies and repair assistance to passing spacecraft. But the Ecological Observatory, which does not belong to the marginal star field but to the developing star field, has no reason to help bear these responsibilities. Unless a distress signal. For ordinary people passing by in a spaceship, they have no obligation to rescue when they receive a distress signal. But for public facilities such as space stations, even if they are not necessarily government-funded space stations, but purely invested by some companies, they must also assume the obligation to rescue when they receive a distress signal. The same is true for the two colonies that Chen Ming has just acquired. If someone sends a distress signal in the galaxy where the two colonies are located, near the galaxy, or near the hyperspace area to which the galaxy belongs, then Chen Ming has the obligation to ask the colony to send a corresponding rescue fleet. So what Chen Ming is doing now is to get the attention of this space station to receive the distress signal. Of course, Chen Ming can't just send a distress signal in hyperspace, because there are too many variables. It's best to send a distress signal after entering the galaxy. This requires more detailed planning, and it is full of variables, so it's not enough to rely on theory and plan alone. It still depends on his on-the-spot reaction at that time. Now Chen Ming has only one thing to do. Just create a little malfunction in the directional cruise system of this tattered Sentinel. Chen Ming did this, and then the Sentinel drove the autopilot system into the clouds around the hyperspace channel and was completely swallowed by the clouds flashing with hyperspace lightning. The spacecraft kept colliding and rubbing against the clouds, and because of the spacecraft, hyperspace lightning appeared more frequently and constantly bombarded the outer armor of the spacecraft. The Sentinel was originally a second-hand spacecraft, and it was still fragile even with the militarized subsystem installed. Moreover, it was roughly modified. In just a few seconds, a large number of problems immediately appeared in various components of the spacecraft. First, the central control system of the spacecraft malfunctioned due to the strong electromagnetic interference caused by hyperspace lightning. Chen Ming instantly lost the ability to continue to control the spacecraft using electronic equipment and could only rely on manual devices to adjust the course of the spacecraft. Then, the fragile outer layer of the cargo hold of the spacecraft, which was deliberately thinned by Chen Ming, was pierced by hyperspace lightning, and a large number of cheap supplies purchased by Chen Ming were all sucked out by the vacuum and disappeared into the clouds. Some supplies were even destroyed by lightning in front of Chen Ming, and were photographed by the few remaining sensors on the outside of the spacecraft in the hyperspace cloud. As some armor and hull near the cargo hold were damaged, more and more places on the spacecraft were damaged by lightning. So much so that the external armor and hull where the life support system was located were gradually destroyed. As a result, the spacecraft has completely lost its function of protecting people. If you don't wear protective clothing and other equipment, you will not be able to survive on the spacecraft. Even in many places inside the spacecraft, hyperspace lightning passes through it from time to time. The spacecraft is shaking. But this is the effect Chen Ming wants. He had already asked Wuping to wear power armor, and he had also enhanced the protective performance of the modified main control room. After being beaten by lightning in the hyperspace cloud, Chen Ming used a little psychic power to assist, and drove the spacecraft and successfully escaped from the hyperspace cloud. Although it escaped, the Sentinel class was already in a precarious situation. There were damages and holes everywhere, and it looked like it would disintegrate at any time. And it was more difficult to navigate in the hyperspace cloud layer than in the outside world, and the fuel consumption rate was inexplicably fast. Before I knew it, the fuel of the spacecraft was almost exhausted. Because the cargo hold was destroyed, Chen Ming no longer had any follow-up supplies on hand, and the fuel could not be replenished at all. Moreover, the vacuum of hyperspace is different from that of the normal universe. There are not only those hyperspace channel clouds visible to the naked eye in hyperspace. There are also many similar to air, but the Empire has not been able to study the specific properties of a kind of material filling. Although the specific properties cannot be determined, the Empire can be sure that it is this material that limits the speed of the spacecraft in hyperspace, resulting in an upper limit to the speed of hyperspace navigation. So the current situation is that there is resistance in hyperspace, the spacecraft is short of fuel, and it is even impossible to accelerate to the limit speed in hyperspace. The Sentinel can only drift along the gravity well of the hyperspace channel. And affected by the location specially selected by Chen Ming, the final location of his spacecraft drifting is exactly the galaxy where the Ecological Observatory is located. After confirming the result according to the calculation, Chen Ming breathed a sigh of relief. At least the preliminary preparations were not in vain. Next, it depends on whether there will be any unexpected situations after the drift reaches the destination. Taking advantage of the present, Chen Ming simply controlled Wuping to take the remaining materials and tools on the spacecraft and began to repair the damaged parts on the spacecraft. Of course, the materials used were the remaining materials on the spacecraft and the materials removed from some less important components. Moreover, Chen Ming tried to limit his technical level as much as possible, maintaining the level of an ordinary repairman who had studied for several years. He had to at least repair the oxygen production function of the damaged life support system on the spacecraft, so that the oxygen on the spacecraft would not be insufficient until the end of the drift, and it would be bad if someone discovered the problem. A few hours later, as the drift distance became farther and farther, Chen Ming was lucky not to encounter any passing spacecraft. At this moment, Chen Ming finally saw the star of his target galaxy, which was slightly distorted in the hyperspace due to the influence of its own gravity well, like high-temperature burning air. High-temperature burning the air is a kind of irregular distortion, but the gravity well of hyperspace has a regular beauty. The spacecraft was soon captured by the gravity well, circling the gravity well, and gradually began to fall into its deepest part. Chen Ming did not continue to observe the details of the gravity well from an unprecedented perspective as he did now. Since it has been captured by the gravity well, it means that the Sentinel has reached the edge of this galaxy in the hyperspace. He used the remaining fuel to start the hyperspace channel system, left the hyperspace, and arrived at the edge of the galaxy in the normal universe environment. There is only one planet in this galaxy, that is, the habitable planet with no exploitable resources. Although it is invisible to the naked eye, the sensor cannot scan the object. After all, the spacecraft is no different from scrap metal in Chen Ming's eyes. But Chen Ming knows that his target is in the orbit of the habitable planet. Since there is no colony in this galaxy, there is no patrol team that has nothing to do. Only the Ecological Observation Space Station above the orbit of the habitable planet has a small fleet that has been approved to protect the safety of the space station. Chen Ming used the last bit of fuel to slowly accelerate for a distance, and then turned on the distress signal. A few minutes later, a communication signal requested to access Chen Ming's spacecraft. Chen Ming immediately connected, and a man in his 40s appeared on the screen of the control panel in front of him. He was obviously stunned when he saw Chen Ming wearing a military-style power armor. But he was only stunned for a moment. After seeing Chen Ming open the light-shielding layer of the power armor mask so that people could see his face, he did not have any other extra emotions. Or treat this matter as a normal matter and handle it according to the normal process. This is the rescue team of the habitable planet Ecological Observation Space Station, numbered 1091. What help do you need? This uncle does not look like a left-handed molecule at the moment. Although according to the information obtained by Chen Ming, this is a left-handed base. What if there are a few normal people here like the two colonies controlled by Chen Ming? So Chen Ming would not doubt him for no reason, and did not show much. He just silently placed a rough inspection report of the spacecraft very close to the camera, so that the other side could see the damaged life support system and the spacecraft hull, which caused the oxygen in the cockpit to no longer exist. At the same time, in order to maintain ManhwaRecap's current personality, Chen Ming also planned to respond with a "no strangers allowed" look. But now he was asking for help, so Chen Ming still let ManhwaRecap show an ugly smile. When I was in hyperspace just now, the spacecraft system malfunctioned and drove directly into the clouds. I was lucky to barely survive. I will send you my identity information and spacecraft log. The uncle on the other end of the communication felt that he was frightened by ManhwaRecap's smile for a moment, and he forced himself to confirm with ManhwaRecap. Why didn't you send a signal in hyperspace? Otherwise, we should have received it long ago, and hyperspace would not affect the distress signal, right? I know it won't affect me, but my fuel was almost exhausted when I flew out of the cloud. The warehouse was broken, and all the supplies fell out. I'm worried that the spaceship doesn't have enough fuel, so I just shut down all the systems and wait until I get to the place. I'm sure I can float here along the gravity well. The uncle confirmed again. Have you ever had experience in flying a spaceship? I worked as a field officer in a security company a few years ago, and I was the captain. The uncle looked at ManhwaRecap's tall physique and a fierce look behind the screen, and believed this statement. Security company. Okay, you send the things that should be sent as soon as possible. I'm already preparing to rescue and tow the spaceship. Keep in touch. Okay. Chen Ming sent the spaceship log, identity information, and other things that should be sent, and waited for the rescue from the space station or attack. Although at least up to this point Chen Ming has not seen any connection between this uncle and this space station and Zhujiang, he still remains vigilant. What if? But this time things did not develop in the direction Chen Ming thought. 10 minutes later, 3 spaceships came from the galaxy, 2 Gladiator-class frigates commonly used by patrol teams, and a gravity tugboat called the Bull class. They dragged Chen Ming's dilapidated Sentinel to the Ecological Observation Colony. The Sentinel was soon towed to the space station. The moment Chen Ming got off the spaceship, the Sentinel was towed away by the space station's device and towed to the maintenance site. and he stood firmly on the ground of the space station. At this point, Chen Ming felt that the matter was over. As long as he directly controlled the entire space station, everything would fall into his hands completely. However, as soon as Chen Ming started, he found that Zhujiang had actually partitioned different areas of the space station. The entire space station was divided into several modules, and there was no physical connection. Especially the port, which was open to the outside world, was even more partitioned. There was no critical database in this small port area, and the place where important information was stored was not in this area. Ordinary space stations would not be designed like this at all, and such a structure was very telling. And this also made Chen Ming not know what to say. The space station must have been designed as a whole when it was first designed, and this situation is definitely due to the subsequent modification. Zhujiang is probably targeting him. Of course, Chen Ming is just talking. In fact, he feels that the shooting of this structure should be used to quickly separate different modules. Ports like this are generally places where outsiders gather. If it can be separated quickly, then the space station can quickly destroy this place with its own firepower. This special structure must be used to cause trouble at critical moments. But it's okay. Chen Ming came here by normal means, so he doesn't have to worry about being suddenly targeted by Zhujiang in this way without knowing it. And if he really wants to attack, relying on Wupiang's body, a module separation can't stop him at all. Just when Chen Ming was observing the situation at the port of the space station, the uncle who had appeared in the communication before suddenly came over from the direction where the spaceship was sent away and asked Chen Ming, who was wearing power armor and looking around, "And Wupiang, right?" Chen Ming immediately said in a deep voice, "Yes." "Well, I am the rescue captain here, Mao Xingwang." "Young man, you are lucky. I just looked at your spaceship. The engine was almost pierced by lightning. If it was really pierced, you would die in the clouds." Chen Ming thought about Wupiang's personality for a while and remained silent without responding. Uncle Mao didn't say anything, but just waved to Chen Ming and said, "Come with me. I will arrange a place for you to rest for a few days. Do you want to find a tugboat company to help you tow the spaceship to the nearest colony or repair it here? If you repair it here, it is not our obligation, and it costs money." Chen Ming made a fortune from selling pirate spaceships some time ago, although he has spent it all. But later he made another sum of money from paying pirate bounties, which should be enough to repair the spaceship. "I have money, but I still have my stuff on the ship. I want to go check it out." "Are you worried about losing your stuff? Okay, let's go over and count what's on your ship and settle the bill first." After arriving at the maintenance site, Chen Ming looked around at the entire surrounding environment again. There are no people here, just some robots doing basic work. And as Chen Ming came to the maintenance site, he could also see that this place was also an independent module. Like the port, it was separated from other modules on the space station. It seems that all the parts of this space station that are open to the public should be partitioned, making it easier to uninstall this module at any time. It is also convenient to launch attacks directly on the uninstalled module after uninstallation. At this time, Chen Ming looked back and saw that the direction of the port he had just come over was clearly visible from this position. The design was similar to that of the pirate space station. It is obvious that the space station was definitely not separated as it is now. Before the transformation, it was definitely the same integrated design as the pirate space station. There is definitely something wrong with this design. "What are you looking at? I'm the only one working here." When Chen Ming heard this, he withdrew his gaze, looked at Uncle Mao who was walking in front, and asked, "Are you a maintenance engineer?" "It's just a part-time job. Did you see the robots here? They are the ones doing the work. We usually work at the search and rescue team. If we see any distress signals, we will report them. You are the first person I have rescued in the past 6 months. One is really rare. You said you were a security guard, right?" "I used to be, but now I'm working as a bounty hunter, causing trouble for pirates." Hunter is good. It would be good to catch more criminals." Chen Ming felt that the Uncle Mao in front of him did not look like Zhujiang based on his current performance, but it was difficult for anyone to say without evidence. So he chose to remain silent. Uncle Mao also saw Wupiang's character, and he had no objection to Wupiang's lack of answer. He just went to a device and clicked a few times, calling Chen Ming over, Chen Ming's three-dimensional structural diagram of the damaged Sentinel was currently displayed on the equipment panel he had just controlled. It was just scanned. Your spaceship has been dragged here, and no robot has been on it. Everything on the spaceship has been sorted out for you. Take a look for yourself. If there is anything missing, it must have fallen out while you were in the clouds. Don't rely on me. Won't. Chen Ming knew very well what was left on the spacecraft after experiencing the baptism of the hyperspace lane cloud. They are all worthless things anyway, so naturally they won't be idle and cause trouble. After roughly looking at it, Chen Ming nodded to Uncle Mao. Uncle Mao then debugged the equipment and said, "The maintenance report has also come out. Take a look. The conditions here are not that good. We can repair the shell and main controller of your spaceship. As for the armor, you will have to go back and find a solution yourself. As long as you don't rush into the clouds again, it should be enough for you to fly as close as possible. Of the colony. Can you see the price? If you have any questions about the material cost, labor cost, and machinery cost, you can talk about it now." Just as Chen Ming was about to reply that he had no problem, he suddenly heard the roar of an engine behind him. He immediately turned his head and looked behind him. At the port, a destroyer suddenly landed. Judging from the model and painting of the spacecraft, it seems to be a government spacecraft. The cabin door of the spacecraft opened quickly, and a man in a suit and tie who looked to be in his 30s came down from the top, surrounded by several people. He looked at the crowd greeting him at the port of the space station with a smile on his face, and he seemed to have some status. Who is that person? Uncle Mao, who did not urge Chen Ming to answer the price question and was also looking at the port, said, "It seems to be a government official. He has been here several times in the past few days. He is mysterious and has no idea why he is here." Government? Chen Ming was thinking about the relationship between this ecological observation space station and the government. Can it come several times in a few days? I'm afraid this government official has some unclear relationship with Wujing. Chen Ming first wrote down the appearance, remaining suspicious in his heart. But after all, the person who said this is Uncle Mao who works on this space station. I still can't believe everything I say, so let's take another look. Hey, stop looking. Uncle Mao suddenly reached out and knocked on Chen Ming's power armor and said, "Let's settle the bill first." Chen Ming took one last look at the man and turned his head, taking out the terminal and preparing to pay. While paying, he asked in passing, "Can the power armor be repaired?" Uncle Mao quickly denied it and said, "How can this be repaired? Who dares to repair it for you? What about the charging place?" Uncle Mao pointed to the corner. Chen Ming said nothing and silently paid the money needed for spacecraft maintenance. Then he went to the corner of the maintenance site and jumped out of the power armor, plugging in the cables to the power armor like an ordinary power armor owner. Uncle Mao saw Chen Ming's actions and felt slightly relieved, so he didn't say much about Chen Ming's military power armor. It was his eyes that subconsciously focused on Chen Ming's height of 1.9 meters and nearly 2 meters, and Whooping's prosthesis. But I just paid attention to it and didn't say much. Just when Chen Ming was looking at the port next door at the maintenance station. At the port, the man in suits and leather shoes who got off the spacecraft also noticed the situation at the maintenance site. After all, the military power armor Chen Ming just wore was too dazzling. He immediately whispered to the people around him, "Who is that person?" A space station manager immediately responded, "We just received a distress signal and a person was rescued." He said that he encountered a malfunction in the spacecraft's autopilot system in hyperspace, and then rushed into the channel cloud and barely escaped. He is the only one alive? His spacecraft has been modified and can only be driven by one person. He is the only one on the spacecraft. What is his identity? He said that he used to work for a security company. Recently, he has been a bounty hunter in the marginal star field, hunting pirates in nearby galaxies. The official learned the general situation from the administrator, and then looked at the secretary beside him and asked, "What is the actual situation?" The manager was slightly dissatisfied with the official's question, but did not express it obviously. The secretary clicked a few times on the terminal and said, "I checked with your authority. He is indeed fine," but he concealed that he had joined the army and retired, and then followed the security company to work and disappeared for several years. The official's heart tightened and asked, "When did he retire? Why did he disappear later?" "I retired 15 years ago and have been working as a security guard since then. He disappeared because he participated in a security mission for an independent colony. It has nothing to do with us. It is probably an accident." The official relaxed after hearing the time and the reason and nodded slightly. But he still pointed to Chen Ming's direction and said to the manager, "Don't let anyone ruin our business. Let him go as soon as possible." "I understand." The government official walked into the interior of the space station, those areas that were not specially isolated, surrounded by a group of people. The managers of the space station quietly left the vicinity of the team and rushed to the maintenance station as soon as possible. But he didn't intend to really drive Chen Ming away directly, because there was nothing wrong with Enwupieng's coming, although the military power armor made him a little worried. But the old appearance of Enwupieng's power armor, combined with the background they investigated, basically led to many reasonable conclusions that had nothing to do with them. But since the superiors had spoken, and Enwupieng really came here for no reason when a big shot came, it might indeed cause trouble. So he had to explain what he should explain. But he couldn't really drive people away directly. After all, if he really drove away the people who had just received the distress signal and rescued them just because an important government figure arrived at the space station, if Chen Ming was a thorn in the side and exposed the matter, it would attract more unnecessary attention. But when he came to the maintenance station, he noticed that there was only Uncle Mao here, operating the equipment to repair the damaged spacecraft. When he saw the spacecraft that could disintegrate at any time, he once again confirmed his idea that Enwupieng's arrival was really just a coincidence. Uncle Mao soon noticed that someone had come to the maintenance station, and after seeing who it was, he immediately stopped, ran to the manager, and said with a little restraint, "Deputy Manager Chong, what's the matter with your visit?" Deputy Manager Chong looked around the maintenance station and asked, "Where is the person who just came?" "He went to buy supplies. He's next door. Do you want me to call him back?" "No, but you saw it just now, right? The big government official who just came will stay on the space station for a few days. Just don't let the kid who just came run around." "Okay." Uncle Mao agreed decisively, and Deputy Manager Chong left the maintenance station full of metal and oil smell. Chen Ming was buying supplies with the person in charge of the space station's material management at this moment. After all, he is now playing the role of Enwupieng. As a person who just sent a distress signal, he obviously needs to buy enough supplies for the next journey. It just so happens that the space station is also obliged to provide people who send distress signals with supplies that can sustain a week of spacecraft navigation at market prices. So Chen Ming naturally asked Uncle Mao to help introduce it, and then asked Uncle Mao to arrange the robot to repair the spacecraft, and he ran to the material management office alone. In this way, he could observe the situation of the space station more on the way. Unfortunately, there was nothing worth noting in the outer area of the space station, so he could only come here honestly to buy supplies. While buying supplies, he was also thinking, how should he sneak into the core area of the space station, infiltrate it, obtain information, and conduct an investigation on the left-handed elements? Chen Ming originally wanted to find someone to ask indirectly, but Enwupieng's character is not a talkative person, and if he asked too much, others would definitely be suspicious. This is a place where Chen Ming's design is not good. However, Chen Ming originally created Enwupieng for fighting, and his abilities were designed in this direction, so his personality was also matched. Otherwise, the contrast of the whole person would be particularly large, and it would be easier to be suspected, which was also unavoidable. After thinking for a while, Chen Ming still wanted to use a decisive plan, such as directly removing the restrictions of the prosthesis and rushing into the core of the space station with the monster in his body. But what if the space station is actually divided into more partitions, and we have to force our way directly into the core area to achieve our goal? The space station is not small. Even if Chen Ming controls Enwupieng and transforms, he may not be able to suppress Zenjij's space station in a short time. If he really wants to do this, it will be very troublesome to safely save some information of the space station. If he forcibly uses psychic power to save the data without deleting it, it will be more likely to expose the connection between Enwupieng and Chen Ming himself. It's quite a headache. If Chen Ming's purpose of coming here this time is just to destroy Zhujiang's space station, then he could have started directly a long time ago. But he came here this time to get more clues about Zhujiang, so he can't do it this way. He must be fully prepared before he can start. At least he must first understand the general situation of the space station. It just so happens that it will take about a week to repair his spaceship. After all, the damage is too thorough. He still has time. It just so happens that there is a big man on the space station now, and he should know a lot of information. Maybe he can find a way to start with him. Just when Chen Ming was thinking about the next plan, Uncle Mao suddenly appeared beside Chen Ming and said, "Hey, and whooping, someone specifically asked me to tell you not to run around on the space station these 2 days. We saved you. You have to respect us, right? The space station really only has the obligation to rescue. As long as the person is rescued, it is okay to call a tugboat to tow Chen Ming to the nearest colony." Uncle Mao is willing to give Chen Ming the opportunity to choose, although it may be to make a little money, but it is indeed true. But someone specifically asked Uncle Mao to explain? Why did Uncle Mao mention this point specifically when he could just say no? Chen Ming was a little confused, but in Whooping, who he played, would not resist this and said, "I will leave when the spacecraft is repaired." He agreed and said so, but how to actually do it is a matter for the future. And when Uncle Mao said that someone had explained this matter, Chen Ming felt that there should be something wrong. So he simply used his psychic power to call up the monitoring system of the maintenance station of the space station that he had already controlled. The appearance of the person who had just come to explain the matter immediately appeared in front of him. Chen Ming had some impression of the space station manager. It seemed that he was next to the government official just now. The government official had already noticed him. And Chen Ming had just found out the identity of the government official directly through the local public government website. His name was Yi Lirong, the director of the local star-level cultural and tourism department. The reason for coming here this time happened to be explained by an announcement on the government website. It was said that in order to develop the star-level tourism industry and allow some backward star systems to develop, they would cooperate with this ecological observation space station to conduct field investigations. It sounded like there was no problem. Such people came, and it was actually no problem to clear out the idle people like in Whooping. Everything looked normal, but this space station was related to Zhujiang, and everything was not normal. However, although Chen Ming now knew who arranged it, he still did not take any action. Anyway, it would take another week to repair the spacecraft, so there was really no rush. The president's investigation into Zhujiang and the dimensional infection could not produce results within a week. Zhujiang had been hiding for so long, and Chen Ming did not find out until Lu Wei died unexpectedly. This matter could not be solved simply. Moreover, Chen Ming came here to hide his identity and the connection between Whooping and Chen Ming himself. Many small actions in the psychic field must be done after they are completely safe, and no one will find out. Chen Ming quickly agreed to Uncle Mao, but Uncle Mao did not leave. Instead, he waited until Chen Ming's payment for the purchase of materials was almost complete, and waved to Chen Ming and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to see where you can go these days." Originally, our space station was not open to the public, but you were rescued by us, so we also arranged some places for you to visit. Okay. Chen Ming agreed again, without showing any specialness. Uncle Mao then took Chen Ming to 3 places. A place to eat, a small cafeteria, which seemed to be specially provided for people working in these peripheral areas. Ordinary employees seem to need to pay for meals here. The accommodation is an ordinary centralized dormitory with 4 people in one room, which is not too crowded. There is also a workplace, which is the place where the space station receives distress signals. There is a distress signal management office hanging at the door of this place. When you open the door, you can see that there are 6 or 7 people here besides Uncle Mao, all of whom are in their 40s or 50s, all gathered in front of 2 tables in the office. Everyone stared at Chen Ming and Uncle Mao, who had just come in. Uncle Mao wanted to reach out and pat Chen Ming's shoulder, but he couldn't reach him. In the end, he patted Chen Ming on the back and said, "It's okay. This kid was just rescued by a distress signal. You take care of yourself," he explained, half-pushed Chen Ming to the workbench in the room, and pressed Chen Ming to the seat. Of course, Chen Ming didn't resist, otherwise Uncle Mao would definitely not be able to push him. But at this point, Chen Ming finally couldn't help asking, "Why did you bring me here?" Uncle Mao said as if reciting a text. While enjoying rights, if conditions permit, the rights holder should also bear some of the obligations of the rights enjoyed. Chen Ming said nothing, and there was a little confusion on his slightly fierce face. You may not know that this article is written in the Imperial Code of Rights and Obligations of Distress Signals. Of course, Chen Ming knows this, which means that the person who sent the distress signal has been rescued. He must take the initiative to provide assistance to the rescuers to a certain extent, which means that he must cooperate. If conditions permit, providing rescue assistance to rescuers is equivalent to asking the rescued person to save other people. Although this rule seems to exist or not, after all, everyone has asked for help who is still qualified to help. But Chen Ming is in really good condition now, and no one needs help, but the Code of Obligations does stipulate this. So Uncle Mao pressed Chen Ming onto his seat and asked Chen Ming to help him look at the distress signal equipment. Chen Ming glanced at the equipment in front of him, then turned back with a fierce face. "Do I look good enough to talk?" Uncle Mao looked a little embarrassed and said, "It's not about your face that matters whether you're good or not, it's about other things. Please." After he finished speaking, he patted Chen Ming's shoulder hard, and even after patting him, he didn't take his hand away, as if he wouldn't take it away unless he agreed. Chen Ming immediately reached out and grabbed Uncle Mao's hand and threw him away, looking very disgusted. At the same time, he stared at Uncle Mao's face with confusion. But the confused expression quickly disappeared. Chen Ming thought about it carefully. After all, this was a distress signal management department, and the equipment here seemed to be of use. Therefore, Chen Ming did not refuse in the end. He just put the hand that had just grabbed Uncle Mao's hand into his clothes pocket and took out a tissue to wipe it with. How to do it? When this device receives a distress signal, it will automatically alarm. If the alarm occurs, just send the communication signal and leave the rest to me. In other words, in fact, no one needs to look at this device at all. Someone can just answer the phone after asking for help. Uncle Mao patted Chen Ming's shoulder again and said, "You have to pretend?" "Okay." Chen Ming sat upright where Uncle Mao had been working, holding the instruction manual that Uncle Mao had just thrust into his hand, and pretending to check how to use the equipment. Then he heard several employees in the office behind him immediately take out some coins and playing cards from their pockets. The whole office suddenly became noisy. Everyone was noisy about the card game that was suddenly stopped just now. Now Chen Ming knew why everyone in the office was staring at him when he just came in. Forget it, it's okay. They are playing their own game. Chen Ming still plans to use the equipment of the Distress Signal Management Office first. The equipment here has good ability to receive and send signals. It can be overclocked and modified to be directly used for signal shielding. Of course, Chen Ming could not directly use psychic modification at this time, but had to use the technology that he had actively reduced to modify. Then you must first understand the direction of the line. Although the overall design of the space station has been changed, the style is definitely the same. This fact shows that the current technical level can definitely do it. Understanding part of the space station is equivalent to understanding the entire space station. It will be more convenient to block the signal then. And this place in front of the workbench is not bad. With his back to everyone, no one will notice him. Chen Ming quietly released a large amount of metallic liquid from the palm of his hand that was pressed on the instrument in front of him. It penetrated into the structure of the space station along the structure of the equipment and gradually penetrated into the surroundings. Metallic liquid is also Chen Ming's eyes. Although it is not his hand and cannot be controlled indirectly like Yu Hui, he can definitely use this thing to see what is on the space station. However, Chen Ming's metallic liquid had just spread out not far. The metallic liquid was suddenly blocked. There is an extremely thin metal film made of silent alloy that blocks each space station module. The silent alloy is a psychic metal material that even Chen Ming's psychic powers cannot control. To be precise, it is not a psychic metal material, but a metal material that blocks psychic energy. It is also the material of the box that Chen Ming usually uses to place the portable psychic wave generator. Now Chen Ming really had to suspect that Zhu Jing was really targeting him. If he wants to let the metal liquid pass through the partition membrane, he must either destroy it directly, or he must be exposed to the surrounding environment. Destroying the metal film is definitely an act of seeking death. Chen Ming has already seen some induction lines mixed in the metal film. Once the metal membrane is damaged, an alarm will immediately sound throughout the space station. The external environment is full of surveillance, even outside the space station. It is impossible to handle this matter without being exposed to the environment. Chen Ming searched for a long time and did not find any blind spots around the space station module where he was now. This is a bit troublesome. That's when Chen Ming suddenly heard someone calling him from behind. "Hey, that young man over there, 3 are short of 1. Can he play cards?" Can he play? Playing cards? Chen Ming turned his chair and looked at the person who had just spoken to him. There was one less person at his table. He had just pushed the door open and left. Although playing cards was a bit of a waste of time for Chen Ming now, he had nothing to do now. The research on the equipment in the office was almost done. In the future, as long as he had the opportunity to wander around the office, Chen Ming could directly use the materials at hand to transform the equipment that receives and responds to distress signals into equipment that seals the signals of the entire space station. But this alone was not enough. Chen Ming still needed to conduct a more in-depth investigation of the space station. But now he has also made it clear that metal liquid cannot penetrate the silent alloy, and destroying the silent alloy membrane will also lead to unpredictable results. If he wants to conduct a more in-depth investigation, he can either choose violent means directly or find other ways to penetrate, or rely on his relationship with the insiders here. Violent means have just been rejected by Chen Ming in his heart. Because his goal in coming to this space station is no longer to destroy, but to find clues. It can only be said that if Lu Wei had not died, the situation might be a little different. After An Wuping arrived at this space station, he might have directly used violent means to start clearing out the Zhuojing elements on the space station. But since there is the matter of Lu Wei, the situation of dimensional infection, and the clues of the Camo star region that can be provided by the president in real time, Chen Ming can use these clues to connect the two sides and let An Wuping participate in the affairs of the Camo star region with a reasonable identity and reason. Then Chen Ming must first find valuable clues from this space station, a clue that can connect An Wuping and the clues from the president. Chen Ming can be sure that this space station is 100% directly related to Zhuojing. As a clue related to Zhuojing that he has only caught after so long of conflict with Zhuojing, can he break it so easily? So at this time, peaceful handling is obviously more appropriate than violent methods. He can only choose the latter two. If you want to infiltrate the space station, it is obviously not enough to rely on metal liquid alone, and other infiltration methods cannot be thought of for the time being. Then Chen Ming seems to have only the third method left. Find a way to enter the interior of the space station through the relationship with the space station personnel. It does not have to be a particularly good relationship, as long as it is the kind of relationship that can be alone for a while without being suspected. The psychic power and ability of the Queen of Insects can be used freely on An Wuping. As long as he can contact people alone, Chen Ming has various ways to obtain the genes of other people. With genes, Chen Ming can naturally disguise himself as them to enter the interior of the space station. Playing cards is obviously a way to get closer. But there is a question that Chen Ming is not clear about now, that is, whether these people in the office are left-wing elements and whether they can enter the space station. Because Uncle Mao's behavior just now drew a huge question mark in his eyes. Chen Ming stretched out his hand and pressed the pocket of his clothes. When Uncle Mao put his hand on his shoulder and asked him to take over the shift so that he could play cards, he hid something in his palm. The touch of this thing is very obvious. It is a ball of paper. When Chen Ming reached out and shook his hand away, the paper ball had already appeared in Chen Ming's hand. There was no need to take it out, just use the metal liquid to see the content on it. There were only 3 words on it: "Take me away." But even so, Chen Ming was still not sure whether Uncle Mao had already noticed that the space station was full of left-handed people, but it was difficult to leave. So he chose to ask for help from an outsider like him? Or was it a test of a left-handed person? So Chen Ming was not sure about the distribution of personnel in this space station. How many left-handed people are there on the space station, and how many ordinary people are there? He even suspected that the staff outside the space station were probably all ordinary people, and only the inside were all left-handed people. So Chen Ming was a little suspicious whether the people sitting in the office had the authority to enter the space station. But what if? So Chen Ming only thought about it for a while and stood up from the front of the equipment. Hit. After saying this word, Chen Ming also took out a few packs of cigarettes from his pocket and distributed them to several people present. Chen Ming himself doesn't smoke, but it's unusual for an Wupiang, a security mercenary, not to smoke. So Chen Ming specially prepared some, and the brand was pretty good. "You're quite good, young man." Others in the office took the cigarettes and asked Chen Ming to sit down. 2 hours later, it was lunchtime and the card game ended. Everyone had a tense face. Chen Ming was like that because an Wupiang looked like that, and the others were because they lost a lot. The only winner was Chen Ming. Although gambling depends on luck, it also depends on some calculation ability. It's normal for a psychic's brain to produce such a result. It's just that the others are a little unhappy. However, Chen Ming now has an Wupiang's face, a fierce look, and a very tall figure, which led to no one daring to say anything, but they all felt a little uncomfortable. One person was left to watch the class, and the others greeted each other and went to the cafeteria. When he walked into the cafeteria, although he already knew the rules, Chen Ming still asked knowingly, "Do I have to spend my own money here?" "Of course, and it's not cheap." "Then today is my treat. You can eat as much as you like." Several people who came out of the office together instantly let out a small burst of cheers, and the tense expressions on their faces melted instantly. They all patted Chen Ming's back enthusiastically and dispersed. Now it looks like they're just a group of ordinary idle employees. Apart from them, Chen Ming felt that almost everyone he had come into contact with in the entire space station seemed like normal people, not left-wingers. Although it is actually a good thing that Zhu Jing is not around, the current situation is not a good thing for Chen Ming's thoughts. How could he enter the space station without the left path? Of course, Chen Ming was still somewhat uncertain in his heart. So in the process of settling lunch, he decided to give it a try. Chen Ming returned to the office with others soon after. In addition to equipment and several tables for playing cards, the office also has a display screen connected to a communication base station, which can play various programs. Chen Ming did not join the game again, but sat in front of the device and turned his chair, holding the remote control in his hand and switching programs at will. Soon, Chen Ming cut the program to a news program, which was playing a piece of news from other star regions. On May 2nd, 5602 in the Gregorian calendar, the leftist elements entrenched in the industrial colony of the Qian galaxy in the Sullen 6-star sector in the Sullen star field were completely wiped out by the local government and the army. The number of arrested leftist elements exceeded 80,000. The following is please read the reports sent back by local reporters. The place being talked about on the news right now was the two colonies that Chen Ming had just acquired. However, the location of these two colonies and this matter were some distance away from where Chen Ming was now, so the people in the office basically didn't pay attention when they heard the place names in front of them. Except for one person, Chen Ming remembered that this person seemed to be called Brother Sure by others. When he heard that the left diameter of his arrest was more than 80,000 yuan, his arms suddenly stiffened when he touched the cards. Chen Ming's attention at this time was all on the people in the office, so he easily noticed such a small movement. Of course, Chen Ming didn't show much other than discovering this, and continued to switch the program channels pretending to be casual. Soon, the program on the display screen was switched to the local travel channel, which happened to be playing an interview about the development of the tourism planet. The interviewee was the official who had just arrived at the space station in the morning, Yilirong. This time, the person who appeared on the screen attracted the attention of everyone playing cards next to him. "Isn't this the one who just came to our place?" They also talked about developing a tourist planet. "We have been here for so long, and we haven't seen anything interesting on the planet below. It's boring. I think they're cheating me out of money again." After a few comments, everyone went back to playing cards. Chen Ming also looked a little bored and switched channels. Only Brother Sher's eyes froze on the display screen just now, and then glanced at Chen Ming again, with an indescribable vigilance. Chen Ming continued to switch programs here and there, and finally switched back to the news channel. The news channel is still playing the news just now. The person speaking on the screen at this time was the person in charge of the military whom Chen Ming had met before. He was presenting the results of the operation. At the same time, Chen Ming once again noticed that Brother Shi suddenly took a heavy breath, but he immediately adjusted it back, and there was no difference at all. But since there have been 3 anomalies, Brother Shi's behavior must not be a coincidence. The people playing cards together were so focused on the game that they couldn't tell, but Chen Ming, who had been silently observing from the side, could see it clearly. Chen Ming suddenly turned off the display, shook his head and said, "It's all rubbish, nothing interesting to watch." Someone who was playing cards immediately echoed, "Nonsense, I see you're bored. Why don't you come and play for a while?" The person next to him immediately scolded, "You want to run away after winning? How come?" Chen Ming waved his hand at the person who spoke to him and said, "It's okay, you guys fight. I'll go take a look at my spaceship." Uncle Mao suddenly said, "It won't be fixed so soon. I'm just taking a look." Chen Ming said something, looked across Uncle Mao's eyes, and then walked out of the office. Just as he stepped out of the office, some metallic liquid suddenly appeared on the soles of his shoes and seeped into the office floor. Then it gradually penetrated the entire office, seeped under Scott's seat, and stuck to the soles of his shoes. No one noticed this. Chen Ming ran to the maintenance station by a familiar route. After staring at the spacecraft for a while, he bypassed the robot and looked for a few tools on the tattered spacecraft, and also removed some usable materials from the damaged parts that had been removed by the robot. Then he squatted next to the equally worn-out Ju Yong power armor that he had passed on, and pretended to maintain the power armor. Soon, just as Chen Ming thought, Uncle Mao also appeared at the maintenance station under the hint from his eyes just now. Chen Ming didn't make any extra moves. He just reached out and patted his clothes, as if dusting them. But Uncle Mao knew that Chen Ming was taking pictures of the note he had just quietly slipped into Chen Ming's hand. Chen Ming did not turn around. He just moved the tools towards the power armor in the corner and said, "I just checked. The monitoring system at the maintenance site does not have recording." "What do you mean?" Uncle Mao looked around, and after confirming that no one was nearby, his expression relaxed slightly and said, "I want to wait until your spaceship is repaired and take me away with you. You may not know this, but this space station is not a place where people can stay for long. I'm afraid you'll get involved if you talk too much. Just go and take me with you. As long as you're not here, you can just find a place to put me down. I won't drag you down." Chen Ming did not agree immediately. "Why should I take you away if you don't make it clear?" "Why?" Uncle Mao gritted his teeth and said as if he had made up a lot of determination, "I'm telling you, listen carefully, but be mentally prepared first and don't make any obvious moves. On this space station, everything is a left path." Chen Ming's hand movement stopped for a moment, not because of Zhuo Jing's news. It's because he is now basically certain that Uncle Mao is indeed an ordinary person. Because the managers of the space station are absolutely leftist and cannot escape. The management staff came over and told Uncle Mao that the outsider Chen Ming should leave as soon as possible. Uncle Mao did indeed explain this to Chen Ming and said what the management asked him to say. So this means that Zhuo Jing really treats him as an ordinary person who had to come here because of an accident. Even if Uncle Mao is actually a Zhuo Jing element, this is really just to test Chen Ming's intentions. There is no need to tell Zhuo Jing directly. After all, if Chen Ming didn't come here specifically to target Zhuo Jing, it would only be there are branches growing out of nowhere for no reason. It's not necessary at all. So Chen Ming can be sure that Uncle Mao is really an ordinary person. Of course, Chen Ming couldn't show Uncle Mao that he already knew about Zhuo Jing, so he just asked Uncle Mao, "What about you? What are you?" "I'm just an ordinary person trying to escape." "Then why are you here?" "Because I was lied to." Uncle Mao looked around and explained to Chen Ming in a low voice, "I have heard a piece of news before. Zhuo Jing really wanted the entire space station to be composed of Zhuo Jing elements. It will definitely not work at the beginning, but they can recruit people and slowly spread the word. There are more and more people behind us. There are so many places on the space station, so we have to move people out of the left path. If this person moves out, he will have to recruit new people. There is no point in recruiting those who believe in Zhuo Jing. People who do not believe in Zhuo Jing will definitely be recruited. Then you have to train them to work after they are summoned, and you have to teach them after training, and then send them away when the number of people is full. It would be too troublesome to do this. So Zhuojie changed its policy later. Technical positions that are more difficult to train, and some less important positions that require communication with outsiders are left to ordinary people who don't believe in left-wing methods. For example, I and several other people in the office can use us as shields when necessary. I thought I had found a good job just a few days after I came here, but I felt something was wrong after just a few days. Uncle Mao felt a little scared when he talked about Zhuojing and said to Chen Ming extremely anxiously, "So we will leave when your spaceship is repaired. Don't get involved. I think you are only in your 30s at most, and you still have a lot of life to live. Don't go up there to report the crime or anything like that. Don't waste your time. Don't get involved with Zhuojing. Just run away." Uncle Mao quickly explained to Chen Ming, and then quickly turned his head again to observe the surroundings. It could be seen that he was indeed very nervous. "I've given you information. You can take me away now, please." Chen Ming still didn't give a clear response and asked, "Why do you know so much detail?" "Because I have a fellow countryman who came here with me. He felt something was wrong with this place when he first came here. He told me what he just said and said he wanted to leave. But just a few days after he said that, he had an accident while doing fieldwork and disappeared. He has not been found yet. It's been almost 3 years. Just because of him, I still dare not leave directly." "What field service?" "Clean up approaching asteroids." Chen Ming frowned slightly. He knew that there were small weapons and traction devices on the outer surface of the space station to clean up asteroids. There was no need to use manpower to do the work. "I'm afraid the field mission is just an excuse. I'm afraid Uncle Mao's fellow countrymen are gone." But Chen Ming still did not agree clearly. Instead, he continued, "It's hard for me to believe you. I want more substantial evidence." Uncle Mao took a deep breath and said, "If you look at the equipment in our office, you can see outside the space station, right? It is strange that such a device, which receives emergency signals and calls for help from the spacecraft, cannot see the outside." Seeing that Chen Ming didn't speak, Uncle Mao took it as Chen Ming's acquiescence and then said, "Every night at midnight, a spaceship leaves the space station. I will find a reason in a few days to ask you to help take over the night shift. You can see it with your own eyes. You will know the corners of the spaceship." Chen Ming actually believed that Uncle Mao was an ordinary person. So as long as there were no logical flaws in what he said, Chen Ming could basically believe it. Especially for this kind of spacecraft to set sail in the middle of the night. It is really strange. But Chen Ming still has a question. "Why do you believe I can save you? Don't tell me what your face looks like." Uncle Mao gave a bitter smile. "To be honest, I'm really afraid of you. But I have no choice but to seek medical treatment in a hurry. No outsiders will come to this ghost place for several years. I can only rely on you." Chen Ming just said that he was pretending to be pretty good. So how could he be remembered as a good person every day? "I remember you said that I was the first person you saved in half a year. What about going forward?" Uncle Mao immediately recalled the previous situation, and a trace of fear suddenly flashed in his eyes. "Last time, there was a distress signal from the nearby hyperspace, and I was the one who brought the person back. I was disturbed by the virtual spirit in the hyperspace and rushed like you. After entering the clouds, a total of 7 or 8 people survived, and the final injury was only a broken arm. Then they all died. It was said that the air pressure of the spacecraft leaked. They didn't have time to put on protective clothing. They all had internal injuries. They all died of the air pressure disease. The higher-ups asked me to get rid of the spacecraft. Do you know how scared I was? I'm afraid that after I finish dealing with the spacecraft, I will be the next one to be dealt with. Fortunately not, but I'm still afraid. I don't dare to do anything. I haven't been back home for several years. I only have some money left for eating and playing cards every month. The rest is sent back. So please, let me go back." Uncle Mao's voice had a hint of crying. Chen Ming was silent for a moment and said, "Let me think about it. If you escape and are discovered, we will all be dead. Maybe it will be safer for you to stay here." "No, I feel like there's something wrong with my brain these days. I have been here for a few years. Although I have always told myself that Zhuojing is crazy, Sometimes when I watched the news at that time, I even felt that Jing was right. After a while, I woke up and I just feel like there's something wrong with my brain. I have to go. I can't stay any longer. If I stay any longer, Uncle Mao swallowed and did not dare to continue. Hearing this, Chen Ming suddenly thought of the conjecture raised by Bai Quan that Zhuo Jing had the ability to brainwash. I am afraid that this matter is as real as Zhuo Jing's dimensional infection. But the purpose of Chen Ming's visit this time was not to save people, but to investigate Zhuo Jing's clues. Now there is a clue. It is the spaceship that Uncle Mao mentioned. So Chen Ming still didn't reply, but just said, "The spacecraft will be repaired in another week. I will reply to you on the 6th day at the latest. At least let me see the evidence, right?" Uncle Mao immediately began to adjust his emotions and said, "Okay, then you go back first. Otherwise the deputy general manager may come to us." "Where are the others? How many are like you?" Hesitation and struggle flashed across Uncle Mao's eyes. After a moment, he shook his head and said, "I don't know." Time passed in the blink of an eye, and it was night. Chen Ming still treated people in the same office to a meal as he did at noon. Then he was the first to finish eating, and the first to return to the dormitory arranged by Uncle Mao. "I live with a few people from the distress signal management office." Since Chen Ming is just an outsider, at least on his first night at the space station, it is definitely impossible for him to help on duty. So there was no need for Chen Ming to go to the office, and he lay down on the bed in the dormitory early to rest. But just as he closed his eyes, his attention was entirely focused on the metallic liquid that he had separated and stuck to the soles of Shi Ji's shoes. Just when Chen Ming turned his attention to these metallic liquids, he happened to see Brother Shi come out of the cafeteria and walk towards the inner area of the space station. When I saw that the direction that Brother Shi was heading towards was the core area of the space station, Chen Ming felt slightly excited. Sure enough, the temptation he made during the day was correct. He has found the leftist elements hidden among ordinary people, and it is up to him to find more clues about the leftist elements. Brother Shi quickly walked through the area where the isolation membrane existed and entered the interior of the space station. Chen Ming immediately controlled the metallic liquid in Shi Ji's soles to separate part of it and seep into the ground. His psychic power can remotely control metallic liquid and can remotely increase the amount of metallic liquid. Even if the entire space station is filled, it is not a problem. But he won't add much now, because when his spiritual energy is used, that is, when he creates metallic liquid, he will still release trace amounts of spiritual energy fluctuations. Although this psychic fluctuation will not leave any residue, it may still be discovered if there are psychics nearby or some equipment that monitors psychic fluctuations. Since Zhuo Jing has deployed silence alloy on the space station, it is impossible for this space station not to have things related to psychic energy. It is a proper act of suicide to conduct experiments related to psychic energy without a psychic being nearby to take care of you. Although Chen Ming knew that Zhuo Jing liked to commit suicide, he probably wouldn't leave a guarantee when doing such a big thing. Therefore, there are definitely psychics on the space station, and they may have been staying at the core of the space station. Although the equipment for monitoring psychic energy fluctuations cannot be completely determined, it is very likely to exist. So even in the area where he was staying now, where he could directly and completely control it with his own hands, he did not manipulate the metallic liquid too much. Because he also has no way to ensure that there are no psychics outside the space station. This ecological observation space station, which is closely related to Zhuojiu, has invited a minister from a government department. It is obvious that there will be a big move in the near future. So in this case, it is normal to find another psyker to protect the smooth progress of this matter. This may be Chen Ming's unfounded worry, but this is what he is used to. Unless it really comes to the point where he needs to react immediately, he will definitely do it in a steady manner. Without knowing the specific location of the psychers on the space station, rashly expanding the coverage of the metallic liquid will definitely cause problems. So at this time, in the area slightly inside the space station, Chen Ming was very vigilant before using metallic liquid and deliberately limited the amount of metallic liquid to a level where he could completely suppress the psychic fluctuations. Of course, if we can find key locations in the space station, such as databases or security system centers, etc., He can directly use that metal liquid to control the internal authority of the space station from a physical and technical level. As long as he can control the entire space station, he can have many ways to sneak into the space station and obtain information about the left path without exposing his own spiritual energy, so there is no need to be as cautious as now. With this idea in mind, Chen Ming continued to control the metallic liquid and began to explore deeper after passing through the outer isolation membrane through Shige. But soon, Chen Ming discovered that his metallic liquid could only restrict internal movement in a certain area, because there are still silent alloy partitions in this area leading to the interior of the space station. Even the interior of the space station is divided into more areas by these silent alloys and modified structures. This made Chen Ming very uncomfortable and confused. The discomfort is that if he wants to continue to penetrate deeper, he has to break through more protective films. The confusion is that it is normal for the left diameter to isolate the outside, but what does it mean to isolate the inside? The value of silent alloy, a material related to psychic energy, is not low, especially if it is made into a metal film with induction circuits inside. Such a huge amount is used on the entire space station. Chen Ming suddenly had a bad premonition. Isn't it possible that there are dangerous and psychic-related things being researched inside this space station, and then these are isolated? Fortunately, he didn't feel any danger at this time. Even if there was any dangerous research going on inside the space station, he still had a chance to stop it or run away. But currently, it seems that Brother Shi has only moved inward to one area. Compare the area of this area and the outermost area with the size of the entire space station. Chen Ming estimated that the entire space station might be divided into 4 or 5 rings. If so many different areas were all isolated from each other by silent alloy, it would be really troublesome to go deeper. At least now, he has successfully allowed the metallic liquid to break through the peripheral isolation membrane and monitoring barriers and enter the interior of the space station. In fact, it seems that other people can also be used as objects to hide the metallic liquid. However, others stated that they were not sure who could enter the space station before. Those that have been determined are either temporarily out of reach, like the deputy general manager who came to explain things to Uncle Mao before, and no one can be seen outside the space station. Either Yi Lirong is being watched by countless people, and it's hard to do anything to him. So he was lucky to be able to find a suitable partner right away. Next, anyone who can move around in the area where the metal liquid is now must have some identity authority. It shouldn't take long for him to find someone who can enter the deeper part of the space station. At least it will definitely be faster than finding Brother Shi. It's almost night now, and most people have gone back to their resting places. There are no people in the space station except for some people on night shift. It's obviously not a good idea to go deeper at this time. It's better to explore this area at this time. It happened that when Chen Ming was still in space, he observed the structure of the space station while being towed to the space station by a tugboat. If he remembered correctly, there should be an internal port in this area. It happened to be the port that Uncle Mao just mentioned, that there would be spacecraft leaving the port every midnight. He had to go and see. Just as the metal liquid was controlled to spread towards the port, Chen Ming suddenly noticed that Brother Shi, who had just entered this area, walked into an office. And the person sitting in this office was the deputy manager Chong, who notified Uncle Mao during the day to let in Whooping and go to the branch and not run around in the 2 days when Yi Lirong came. Deputy manager Chong asked Brother Shi, who had just come in, "Shi Xiao, what's the matter with you here?" Deputy manager Chong: "I feel that the guy named in Whooping is a little strange." Chen Ming did not react to this sentence, but just watched calmly. He had thought that this might happen when he was testing before. But everything he did was considered. Every action he made seemed absolutely normal, without any logically tenable doubts. And Zhu Jing still seemed to be a little logical, otherwise Zhu Jing could have taken action when his spaceship was towed over. Of course, it is not ruled out that Zhu Jing just wanted to keep him for a few days and planned to replicate the same handling method of the group of people who received the distress signal half a year ago when Uncle Mao received it. But even if Zhu Jing's elements really did something directly regardless of the evidence, he could also change his course of action immediately, and at most it would be more troublesome to obtain clues. This is the worst case. Chen Ming continued to watch, ready to attack at any time. His previous plan was his previous plan, and if the situation changed, he would have to adapt. Deputy Manager Chang did not have any special attitude at this time because Brother Shi mentioned Chen Ming. He asked as if facing some ordinary questions. What's wrong? What did he do? Shi Xiao quickly recounted today's process. The more he talked, the deeper Deputy Manager Chang's brows frowned. After Brother Shi finished speaking, Deputy Manager Chang stared at him for a while and suddenly slapped the table angrily and said, "Think about what you were talking about? He helped you check the equipment, invited you to the cafeteria for lunch after winning money from playing cards, and played a few TV programs. You suspected him? I don't see any problems." But Deputy Manager Chang waved his hand impatiently and interrupted him. "This is not something you should worry about. Continue to take care of other people. This and Whooping will leave in a few days. Unless he has more obvious abnormal performance, don't tell me." Shi Xiao wanted to say something else, but gave up after seeing Deputy Manager Chang's expression. He turned around and left the office. When he left the office, he didn't notice that the metal liquid under his feet was slightly separated and flowed along the floor to Deputy Manager Chang's feet. After Shi Xiao left, Deputy Manager Chang suddenly shook his head and said to himself, "People who believe in Zhujiang really have different brain circuits from ordinary people." He had already told people to keep an eye on Whooping, the outsider. In addition to Mao Xingwang, of course, there were people who had been watching Whooping from a distance. Of course, it was impossible for him not to be wary of an outsider like Whooping, and he would definitely arrange people to do what he should do. And today, Whooping has been staying with Mao Xingwang and a few others. Only in the afternoon did he go to see his spaceship and repair the power armor. Mao Xingwang also went there as soon as possible to make sure that people would not run around. It can be said that there were no accidents during the whole process. Whooping was also very cooperative and did not make any abnormal moves at all. As long as Whooping stayed safely for the next few days, he could even let Whooping leave here safely at this sensitive time when Minister Yi came. Several people who saw Whooping did not say there was any problem, but Zhujiang, a member of the lower level, suspected him because Whooping changed a few TV programs casually. If everything is done according to Shi Xiao's standards, wouldn't so many ordinary people on the space station need to be more suspicious? They are in contact with Zhujiang every day, and any of them may have discovered something. Moreover, Shi Xiao's job is to keep an eye on those ordinary people used to disguise the space station. Instead of doing his job, he is keeping an eye on Whooping, who Minister Yi said was no big problem. Isn't this clearly saying that there is something wrong with his and Minister Ye's vision? Letting in a person who may be a threat to the space station. If this kind of thing gets out, he may not lose his position, but there will definitely be more people watching this position. It's good that he didn't just let people get out. Deputy Manager Chang shook his head again and put the matter behind him. Chen Ming felt a little interesting when he saw this scene. The deputy manager of this space station was just like Shan Yi, the middleman of Zhujiang, whom he had killed personally. They only treated Zhujiang as a business, not really believing in Zhujiang. Obviously, the middle and high-level managers of Zhujiang actually did not believe in Zhujiang. Only the lower-level managers foolishly fell into the trap, and their thinking was also thinking about moving towards extremes and sensitivity. Although Brother Shi's feeling was correct, Chen Ming did come here to stir up trouble. But today's incident would definitely be fine no matter who saw it. So it was normal that no one believed in a small character like him. Chen Ming continued to pay attention to him for a while after Shi Xiao left the office, but he turned around and walked to the outside of the space station, not like he could continue to walk inside. Chen Ming also shifted his attention away from him. Next, the metal liquid still had to follow this deputy manager. Deputy Manager Chang was one of the people who surrounded Minister Yi before. If there was a chance, he might be able to contact Minister Yi through him. Of course, it's not possible now. Still handling work in Deputy Manager Chang's office. Even the Zhujiang space station still has a lot of work to do. It will probably be time to rest after the work is done. At least there will be a chance tomorrow. So, Chen Ming directly focused all his attention on the last pool of metal liquid that was still moving. At this time, this pool of metal liquid had already arrived at the port inside the space station, and a closed passage in the corner of the port suddenly opened. A spaceship was just sent to the port departure orbit by the transportation equipment, and it looked like it would set sail soon. Judging from the logo, this is a garbage ship, which will take away the domestic garbage on the space station for destruction. This spaceship is the one that Uncle Mao mentioned. And Chen Ming also found something in the corner of the spaceship that should not exist in such a place, according to what Uncle Mao said. Some obvious dark red marks. It's blood. Chen Ming immediately continued to divide the metal liquid into two batches. A batch of metal liquid immediately spread along the direction where the spaceship was transported. But there is still an isolation membrane in the direction where the spaceship came, isolating the port and the inner ring area where the spaceship was transported. At this moment, no one was entering or leaving the passage. The spaceship was transported by purely mechanical structures, and Chen Ming had no chance to go deeper. He could only hide on the spot and see if there was a chance to find a way to enter the deeper part of the space station other than Deputy Manager Chong. And the other batch of metal liquid just separated directly spread along the track to the garbage transport spaceship. Now only this place is worth investigating. However, as the metal liquid just boarded the spaceship, Chen Ming discovered another thing. This spaceship was also wrapped in a layer of silent alloy film that completely protected the spaceship, isolating the metal liquid from the outside of the spaceship. Something that can be transported by such a spaceship protected by a silent alloy film is definitely not a simple thing. Chen Ming felt that he had found the right direction. What Uncle Mao said was indeed correct. After hiding the metal liquid, Chen Ming continued to wait for a while. Near the middle of the night, the spaceship finally moved, flew into space, and then flew to the edge of the galaxy and began to activate the hyperspace channel system and enter the hyperspace. Until here, everything seemed normal. But after the spaceship entered the hyperspace, it just flew a little distance and suddenly turned off the transponder, started the hyperspace channel system again, and left the hyperspace. A spaceship with a turned-off transponder is less likely to be discovered than a spaceship with an open transponder. This spaceship quietly circled back from the edge of the galaxy and went directly to the planet orbiting the space station. It flew directly to the other side of the planet relative to the space station. As the spaceship slowly landed, Chen Ming realized that he seemed to have really found the key, because there was an extremely obvious psychic fluctuation just below the spaceship. Chen Ming once again confirmed the situation of the metal liquids he controlled to prevent the metal liquids from exposing his psychic power. He was a little nervous and expectant at this time. He wanted to know what he could investigate along this spaceship. Soon the spaceship stopped completely. However, at this time, Chen Ming discovered that the situation was a little beyond his expectations, because there was a huge open pit next to the landing site of the spaceship. And in this pit, there were a large number of piled corpses. The appearance, gender, and age of most of the corpses are different, and many of them may be victims of Zhuijing. However, there are still some corpses with the same face. It is obvious that Zhuijing has the cloning technology, selected some suitable people for cloning, and used these clones to do these bad things. These corpses have a common feature: they are all broken, and there is no good meat on the body. There are even deformities in different parts of the body, a kind of deformity that makes people uneasy. It is not the deformity caused by the dimensional infection that Chen Ming knows, but a kind of deformity that Chen Ming feels very familiar, but has never seen before. This contrast makes Chen Ming feel nauseous for some reason, a nausea that seemed to come from psychic instinct. Chen Ming suppressed this feeling and continued to observe the situation of the deep pit through the metal liquid. At present, it seems that the closer to the bottom of the deep pit, the more serious the decay of the corpses. Obviously, this deep pit is definitely not formed overnight. How long has Zhuijing been active here? How many people have been killed by Zhuijing? Just as Chen Ming was thinking, the landing spacecraft suddenly opened the hatch at the tail of the spacecraft. The visible bloody smell immediately spread from the open hatch. The cargo hold of this garbage transport ship was filled with deformed and broken human corpses, just like this deep pit. Along with this bloody smell, there was also a heavy, thick psychic fluctuation with extreme emotions that were familiar and unfamiliar to Chen Ming. When he felt this psychic fluctuation, it seemed as if he saw those deformed corpses. This time, Chen Ming felt an uncontrollable nausea and even in extreme disgust. At the moment when the cabin of the spacecraft tilted slightly under the action of the mechanical structure and threw a large number of corpses carrying psychic fluctuations into the deep pit. This feeling reached its peak. These corpses were not the corpses of psychics, but the psychic fluctuations were spread on their deformed tissues. Just when Chen Ming couldn't help wanting to vomit, he suddenly found that the source of this feeling on him was not just himself. It was his own instinct, and he had a special reaction with the crazy language spirit stone in the hands of his 14th Legion prosthesis. This special reaction affected Chen Ming when he saw these corpses, making him feel nausea and disgust. Chen Ming immediately asked the prosthesis to take Ming, embedded with the crazy language spirit stone, away from him, and used psychic energy to temporarily block the relationship between himself and the resonant spirit stone. Then Chen Ming looked at these corpses again. However, something even more weird happened. After Chen Ming lost the nausea and disgust brought to him by the crazy language spirit stone, suddenly, he had an emotion that made his scalp tingle even more towards the deformed parts of the corpses. A kind of inexplicable good feeling. He had a good feeling for these deformed things. This is impossible. Chen Ming's heartbeat was accelerating. He immediately used a lot of mental power to protect his brain. However, this could only slightly slow down the growth of that inexplicable good feeling. As long as he continued to observe, his good feeling for these deformed tissues would continue to grow. What the hell is this? Chen Ming cursed in his heart. Suddenly he noticed the faces of those corpses. As long as the head was not completely destroyed and the body was barely maintained, the faces of the corpses all showed a stiff smile as if torn out by something. Obviously, it was such a smile, but it felt to Chen Ming as if they were smiles from the heart. This extreme sense of separation made Chen Ming not only tingle his scalp, but also felt obvious physical discomfort. He quickly reconnected himself with the spirit stone and stopped blocking it. At this time, his mood of observing these corpses finally turned back to disgust, and the feeling of nausea came as expected. Those smiles became stiff as if they were torn out again. Only occasionally, Chen Ming would see the scene where the smiles seemed to come from the heart, as if he had seen it wrong. Chen Ming really had never missed this feeling that made him want to vomit as much as he did now. At least this way he could feel at ease. Obviously, in this case, the crazy language spirit stone was protecting him from being affected. Wait, crazy language spirit stone? Chen Ming suddenly realized what the familiar feeling brought to him by the psychic fluctuations spread on those deformed human tissues was, which was an extreme feeling similar to the psychic characteristics of crazy language spirit stone. The source of these deformed human tissues was something similar to crazy language spirit stone. It might not be spirit stone, but it must be a very similar existence. Chen Ming confirmed his thoughts in his heart, took a few deep breaths, and calmed his mind. He would not be surprised by anything that happened in this world where psychic energy existed. But he couldn't be disturbed by such things now. He must investigate. Jing, what are you doing?
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.